Good morning. As I've been recording this the whole time. So this is Contracts Class 101, and today is March 17th, 2025, and we're going to be going over some of the miscellaneous documents. I thought today that we would go over it, at least hit the ones that are most commonly used in contracts between buyers and sellers. And then some of the ones that I know were talked about in the launch training over the last couple of weeks that we can use to maybe strengthen a buyer's offer. Things that are part of an offer that might put the buyer in a better position. If maybe they can't negotiate so much on a certain term, maybe they can strengthen it by negotiating a different term on a different level. So we're going to get started. Then today I don't have anyone in the classroom here with me this morning, and I don't have anyone so far asking to join on Zoom. So we'll just get started here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get into .loop. And again, this is not a .loop class. Any of you that have been to the .loop trainings will probably can follow along with me. If you haven't been to any of the .loop trainings yet, absolutely go to that. I don't teach you how to use .loop here, but I do hit some of the things that you'll be using all the time. So what we're going to be talking about today are all in the KCRAR and possibly, if we get to it, the KW and KC Metro templates. So we go to our templates tab here, and over here on the left side, we have our 2025 KCRAR interactive forms and 2025 KCR residential forms. The residential forms has everything that we're going to be talking about today. The difference between these two is that the interactive forms templates folder has everything in it that KCRAR offers. Oh, here comes someone. Megan's joining me this morning. The interactive forms has everything that KCRAR offers, the Spanish language forms, all of the commercial forms. The residential forms is where you're going to be spending most of your time. So that's what we're going to hit on in here. Good morning, Megan. And so the first—
Good morning, Linda.
And oh, here, let me turn off my speaker here so I don't get a bunch of feedback. All right. You're the only one that's joining me. I don't have anyone yet in the classroom, and you were my first one on Zoom. So
Well, that's not good. I figured I'd join you
no,
since I'm at home recovering. So,
well, yeah, after this, let's make sure that I want to hear what's going on. So,
okay.
all right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
yes. Yeah, Megan had a rough weekend, I'm betting. So, all right. So today is the miscellaneous documents, and I thought that I would hit on the most common ones that we use in our contracts, and then also some of the ones that might help strengthen a buyer's offer. So just jumped into .loop here, talking about the KCRAR residential forms. And so the first one before we even open a document here, I want to talk about the difference between addendum and amendment, because I know that that's confusing. I even said the wrong word the other day in front of Lynn, or to Lynn, actually, of all things, when I know the difference. And so so if I can get confused, I know that everyone else can get confused also. So let's talk about the two words to begin with. An addendum is something that is added to the contract but doesn't change the terms, the existing terms. It adds maybe some new terms, maybe a new point of negotiation or a new disclosure that needs to be made. But an addendum, and the word is right there in the title of the document, an addendum adds to the contract. An amendment, on the other hand, is something that will change something that's already established. An amendment changes a term in the transaction, something that's already been agreed to between the buyer and the seller. The addendum is added usually as part of an offer, part of a contract. It may be added later after the contract has been established, but the amendment is something that changes a term. Add, addendum, amend, amendment. We're changing something that's already there with an amendment. So, so I don't like to spend a lot of time on the addendum that, just our blank addendum form, because it's really quite rare that you're going to use it. It would only be if you've already sent an offer from the perspective of the buyer. If you've already sent an offer to a seller and you really want to add a different term. So it's rarely used for us, and especially for you, if something comes up, make sure you're talking with your coach or with me or Kristen or Lynn about do I need to do that with an addendum. But it's really quite rare that that's going to come up. But we do use amendment quite a bit, so I want to talk about that. And we have our amendment to purchase and sale here. And it really, if you read the documents, which I encourage all of you to always read your documents. I don't think that anyone should ever send something to a buyer or seller to sign when that agent hasn't read it and doesn't understand it themselves. So always read your documents. That's really important. And so it tells you right here and above the header of it, we have our amendment title. And I suggest that you name this whatever the major point of this is. You can number them 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's really quite common in any transaction to have several amendments. You're changing something. Sometimes we have to change the closing and possession date, or something that's come up a lot lately is that we've had to change either the ownership, either adding someone to the ownership that we weren't aware was on the deed, and they have to sign they have to be named and sign all of the documents. So anytime that we are changing something about an existing contract, we have to do an amendment. It's perfectly legal, and if those of you that are fresh out of taking your test and your pre-license class, it's perfectly legal and legitimate to actually change that on the contract by crossing something out and then putting the new updated information on and having everyone date and sign it. It's actually quite difficult to do that in .loop. So there's number one. Number two, brokers don't like to see that. It can get really messy and confusing if we've had to change more than one time on that, just to make sure that the correct information is there. And did everybody actually initial it? And what does this date pertain to? So always use an amendment, even though you might have been taught differently in your pre-license class. So we have our header, we have our name there. And so you might number them, or certainly feel that you can title them whatever the major point is of that amendment. We may have 2 or 3 items on a single amendment. And so you could, kind of name each item with a slash, date change or possession date change slash, add seller slash, whatever the third one might be. So because don't just leave it as amendment in your loop, because now you don't know which one's which. And we talked about this in Wednesday Night Warriors a couple of weeks ago. I always try to mark mine in my own loops, whether it's signed by buyer SBB or signed just by the seller SBS or signed by all SBA. So name them whatever you want to name them that makes it clear in your loop. Our loops get kind of messy sometimes. We have an awful lot of documents. So I'm a firm believer in using folders for certain types of documents in each transaction, and then also naming the document whatever makes it clear to you and to your client customer. So name your amendment, number and name your amendment. I'd like to point out too that this is a KCRAR form. Everything we use through that on the forms that have been approved through KCRAR, so we never really have to worry about if Realty Exec's amendment is different than ours. It's not a problem because we all use the same one, and you're on the right one when it has the KCRAR logo in the top left-hand corner, or our customized documents will have our logo on the top left-hand corner. But it tells you right here, right above the header, this amendment form is for use in changing the terms of an existing contract. It is not intended for use as part of an offer or counteroffer during negotiations. Oh, Danielle's joining us too. There's Danielle. All right. On the addendum, it says the exact opposite. It says it is for use during negotiations and not to be used as for changing the terms of an existing contract. So it makes it pretty clear right above the header, and it's right there in bold, and a lot of it's underlined. So if it's in bold and underlined, you know it's pretty important. So then we have our header, as we do in all of our documents. We identify our seller and landlord, even though in the templates, we have one for sale purchase and one for lease. So even though the documents will actually have seller, landlord, buyer, tenant on all of them, but we have our seller, landlord identified. I know you'll hear that we only have to put the marital status on the actual contract, but just get in the habit of putting it on all of them. There's no reason not to. So identify your seller with their marital status, or of course, if it's an LLC or a corporation, make sure you're using the right designation for that. They won't have a marital status, obviously. Our buyer tenant named, full legal name with marital status. Property address on line 3 on all of these subsequent documents, not on the contract, we have to have the legal description, but on all of the subsequent documents, using the street address is perfectly fine. But be sure that you are using the complete street address, the house number, the street name, the city, and the city, state, and zip code. So property address there, and always use the effective date of the contract on any of our subsequent documents. That's very important. Your effective date of your contract is established by the date of the last signature or initial on the contract or counteroffer. And I'm a paper person. I have paper folders. And so that's one of the things that I write on the outside of my folder and have my folder in front of me anytime that I'm going to be making a change. However you want to take your notes and make your notes that way, but do something, because going back to look at the effective date of your contract is a real time suck if you have to actually go back to the loop and open that contract and double check everything. Make sure that you are using, if you used a counter offer, make sure that you're using the date of the last signature, the last document that both parties sign in the initial negotiations. So effective date of the contract, because I'll always be checking that. That's not today's date. That's the effective date of the contract, which could have been weeks ago. All right, then we have this amendment modifies the terms of the above referenced contract, except for the changes noted below. All of the other provisions of the contract shall remain in full effect. So then, just like we talk about when we're writing the offer or the counter or making a counter offer, everything in the contract itself that the two parties agreed to remains the same, other than what we are changing on this document. Good morning, Danielle. We are
Morning. How are
today.
you?
I'm good. How are you? Thought I'd
Good.
get you all, let you get all settled in before but I knew you were here. So
Yes.
today we're talking about miscellaneous documents for our transactions. And to begin with, I'm just going to go over the ones that we most commonly use. And this is all real basic. I've only got 2 hours. I could spend a whole week on full days on these, but so this is just real basic here.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, of course. And you and Megan are my only two joining me. I don't have anyone in the classroom yet. I sometimes have people kind of show up late. So, all right. So here we reference. So now we are going to actually make the change in our contract. So if it is something that is specifically referenced in the contract or counteroffer, then we will reference that specifically, and our first few paragraphs here, first 3 paragraphs here say, all right, base contract, then our paragraph number. So if we were changing something about about personal property, let me go with that one, because that's in paragraph 1. And if we wanted to include something that was not specifically talked about on the seller's disclosure, then we would reference paragraph 1B, because paragraph 1B are our inclusions. Paragraph 1B and 1C are all about the personal property as referenced on the seller's disclosure, or items that are referenced on the seller's disclosure. So if we've had a further negotiation on something and we do decide that we are going to, even though the seller said that they weren't leaving the kitchen refrigerator, But we've had further negotiations, and that's what the two parties have agreed to. We're going to put it in, we want to amend the contract to say that the seller is leaving the kitchen refrigerator. So we would reference base paragraph number 1B. If we were changing something about another addendum, we would reference that. I'll get back to that. But so paragraph 1B here, and then changed as follows. And the same rules apply here as they do when we are actually filling out those paragraphs in the contract. We are not attorneys. We have to keep that in mind. So keep things short, sweet, and simple. The double-edged sword in that is we have to be specific without being too specific. And we certainly don't want to be too general, leaving anything up to interpretation. So I picked on the refrigerator here because I do like to talk about that when we're writing it in the contract itself, or here on an amendment or any other subsequent document. Be very specific about which refrigerator you mean. If it's the kitchen refrigerator and the buyer wants it, then this is easier. Granted, this is easier to do when you're showing the property and the buyer saying it right there in the property. At the very minimum, get the model number for that refrigerator. If at all possible, get the serial number and put that in there. Because if you just say seller to leave refrigerator, that's pretty broad and general. And maybe the seller had the old beer fridge that they had out in the garage, and that's the one they're going to leave. That's not the one we wanted. And, you know, by the time we have our final walkthrough and or closing and then possession, it's going to be kind of late to be doing something like that. And someone might be buying a refrigerator. So we've all done that. We've all bought an appliance or bought a home warranty or something like that. So just try to minimize your chances of having to do that. So we reference the base contract by paragraph number. Then what I would put in here, seller to, or to convey, or you, lots of different ways you can do it, but just remember you're not an attorney. Seller to leave, and then, you know, whatever it is, LG refrigerator, model number blank, serial number blank, with property. Or you could say, identify the model refrigerator, model number, serial number, will convey with property. So make it short, sweet, and simple, and very as clear as you can possibly make it without getting too wordy. Because again, we are not attorneys. Adding too many words can confuse the situation almost as much as not adding enough words. So, all right, so that's base contract. Or if we were changing something about an addendum that was added, for instance, and actually we could do that. I would prefer that we not change the seller's disclosure unless we are the seller. So I would still, even if we're changing something on an already existing contract that's on the seller's disclosure, I would prefer that you use the contract 1B, 1C inclusions and exclusions. So 1C would be the exact same thing. We're excluding something that the seller said is staying and we don't want it, such as, you know, maybe the above ground pool, something like that. So it would be more along the lines of any of the other addendum that we are changing that might be included. The cold weather waiver, because, you know, we're kind of coming off of that, still certainly should be applicable because on any listing that you find in MLS, because it's still too cold and will be probably for the next 30 days, too cold to test the air conditioning system in a property, because it hurts the compressor if we test it unless it's been above. And this is varying, you know, 60, 65, 70 degrees for a 24-hour period. And our nights are still too cold for that. Certainly most swimming pools are still not open. Hot tub spas, same thing. They're probably haven't been opened yet. So cold weather waiver would still be applicable this time of year. So if that wasn't completed by the seller and we've asked for some clarification on that, and that's what we were changing, then that's how we would reference that on line 8, the cold weather inspection waiver addendum and paragraph, whichever. If it was something with it, maybe the seller hadn't put in the month that it was last used. And so that's what we're changing on that. So that would be in paragraph 1 of the cold weather waiver. And then just again, be as specific as possible without being too specific or too general. I know Linda's talking out of both sides of her mouth there, but and the additional terms down here is just like our additional terms, paragraph 1D in the contract. This, we would only use this when this is not, when what we're talking about in this paragraph is not referenced anywhere else in the contract. I've seen people kind of misuse this. If we are extending the inspection period or the renegotiation period in the contract, they kind of slip it down in here. No, because that's actually referenced to, that is actually something that is in our base contract. Paragraph 13 deals with the inspection period and renegotiation period. So additional terms would be maybe after after everything's been settled, there, you know, because let me tell you, folks, negotiations go on even after everyone has signed everything. Things come up. Something about the seller's situation may change. Something about the buyer's situation may change. And so, a lot of times what we have is something that happens during the appraisal period. We're having several of those. I've seen several of those come through. So an amendment can actually certainly do something about any of those situations. So additional terms, for instance, might cover one of the examples I know that Kristen uses here is if something happens, here's something else that might come up. That after this storm that moved through over the weekend, maybe a large tree branch fell in the property backyard in a vacant property, let's say. And so what we want to do is make sure that the seller takes care of removing that. That wouldn't be dealt with anywhere else in the contract. Don't have a paragraph about removing dead trees or dead tree limbs. So that would be a really good example of something going into the additional terms. And we also then reference paragraph 1D in that, but, or you could reference paragraph 1D in that, but on an amendment, I would prefer that we have additional terms and no, not a reference on that, because again, using the base contract, I want something that's specifically referenced in the contract. Okay, so there's that. On any of these types of documents, we're going to have what's on paragraph 5 here, additional pages. The blank additional pages attached to this amendment contain terms which are an integral part of this contract. If you are changing enough things that 4 paragraphs isn't going to cover it, then that's when you would check the box in paragraph number 5 and add an additional page. I'd prefer that you not use another amendment. Let's use a blank page, but carry over the wording from here. Using another amendment kind of indicates that there's a different amendment. We want to continue this one. So, and we have the standard legal disclaimer at the bottom of every document here. Carefully read the terms hereof before signing. When signed by all parties, this document becomes part of a legally binding contract. If not understood, consult an attorney before signing. And so whichever party is initiating, someone else is here. Brooke is joining us. Whichever party is initiating this document will be the ones that sign it. You'll notice that there is nowhere on here for you to sign. We are not parties to the contract. I know that there are some things that we do sign, but what we are signing are acknowledgements about terms within things that are required disclosures or required acknowledgements. So the contract itself is between the buyer and the seller. We are not parties to the contract, so there's no place for us to sign here. So seller landlord would sign if they are initiating it. Buyer tenant would sign if they are initiating it. Make sure that you're staying on top of this. If this is something that the parties have agreed to, you know, this is again, I think I kind of said this before, but not very clearly. A lot of these things we negotiate verbally before we ever put them in writing. And I would kind of suggest that to you. I know that we all need practice. You all need practice writing these documents, but there's really no point in writing one up unless you're going to send it. And there's no point in really sending it unless that you've had the verbal discussion with the other party, with the either the other agent or the other party if they're unrepresented. There's just, kind of that stigma about sending something that hasn't been discussed before as a blind, here, sign this, here's what I think, sign this. That can really put the other party a little bit on edge. So I think it really softens things, it clarifies things. If you can do some of these negotiations verbally prior to writing them up. There's certainly nothing wrong with writing an amendment. We just don't, taking that element of surprise out of there and making sure that you have clarified the terms with your party before you send it on to them. Again, people don't always read things that they're signing. I know that happens. I know that it happens with my clients. It's certainly going to happen with yours, but it really kind of scares me. So make sure that you have clarified the terms with your person. Don't surprise the other party with them, and then write everything clearly and concisely as possible here. All right, so that's addendum and amendment. Those are the two things that you're going to see most commonly in a transaction. Oh, and Ashley. So it's Monday morning. People are just kind of trickling in here. So good morning, Brooke. I didn't acknowledge you when you got in here either. And Ashley will be joining us here momentarily too. And so I'm always I love it when the other coaches join me on these trainings. So I'm always going to ask Megan if she has anything to add about addendum or amendment that I didn't cover.
I'll just remind everybody, addendum means you're adding something to an offer contract while it's in process, right? And then
Right.
an amendment is after you've have an offer accepted and you need to amend it, change it.
Right. So I did talk
Took me
about that
years
here.
to figure that out. But
And
now
she
that I
has a
know
legal,
it, yeah.
and she has a legal background. That's
Right,
right.
yeah.
Well, like I said to begin with, I know it's confusing. I absolutely understand that. And in pre-license, I know I teach them both at the exact same time, and I probably should split them up a little bit. I know that it is confusing. And I even admitted at the very first of this class, maybe before anyone even joined me, I actually said the wrong thing to Lynn the other day. So, when I knew what I was talking, I knew what I said. So I know it's confusing. And I talked about what amendment says at the above its header. So I will, and I should have gone back to it. So I will now. What addendum says at its header. So as then Megan just said, and I said earlier, addendum, you're adding to. It is during negotiations. You're not changing a term, you're adding something to it. Think of it this way. Our seller's disclosure is an addendum. Lead-based paint is an addendum. The cold weather waiver is an addendum. So this form, as I said earlier, you're not going to use very often. So I'm really I probably shouldn't even really talk about it, because then if someone said, well, do I need an amendment for that? Then I could say, no, this is the one time you're going to need an addendum. We truly don't use these very often, but it makes it perfectly clear above the header on this form. It's in bold and some of it's underlined, so you know how important it is. This addendum is for use as an attachment to an offer or counteroffer during negotiations. It is not intended for use as an amendment to an existing contract. And the amendment says the exact opposite in its block above the header there, that it's used to change terms of an existing contract. So if you read your documents, it'll make it really clear which one you're supposed to be using. And trust me, you will not be using an addendum, this blank addendum, very often. We use addenda all the time, but not that blank one that we fill in like that. All right, so then the other, so those are the ones that we most commonly use. As I said earlier, the cold weather waiver is something that I think should be still included this time of year, absolutely. And so I guess I will talk about that here for a few minutes since I actually mentioned it. So our cold weather inspection waiver, also an addendum, even though it's not in the title of the document. If this is a KCRAR document, KCRAR logo on the top left-hand corner. Again, with this is any subsequent documents that we use, we put in the header, we put the seller's name. I still prefer to use a full legal name that we have on the contract along with marital status, even though you will be told it's not necessary. Why not? And then buyer full legal name with marital status, property address, perfectly okay to use the street address, but use the complete address there. And so then this is letting us know that there are limitations to some of the items on a property that we can't test during our inspection period because of weather conditions. And so the 3 items that we have listed here, the air conditioning system, the swimming pool system, and the lawn sprinkler system. Because of weather conditions, because of possible freezing conditions, we can't test the compressor on the air conditioner when temperatures are below 60 degrees for, we need temperatures above 60 degrees for at least a 24-hour period. Let me put it that way. And this paragraph, then we're asking the seller to let us know there on line 12, when was the last month that they used it and it was working properly. That's the claim that we are asking the seller to verify there for us. This can be a real help to us when it comes warranty time to make a claim on a warranty. If the buyer moves in now and won't turn on the air conditioner for another couple of months and the air conditioner doesn't work when it comes on, we weren't able to test it during our inspection period. Home warranty companies will sometimes kind of balk at these things and will make the claim, well, it was supposed to have been in working condition when the seller moved or when the buyer moved in, the day they took possession. Well, how can we prove that it was when it would have damaged it, which, for us to have verified that? So this can be a help. I've seen this be a help in times past, that when the seller says, oh, it was working just fine in September, or October. This year is probably October. So this last year was probably October. Same thing about swimming pool systems. Most people don't open their pools until very late April or sometime in May. So we can't test the equipment there. So we would have the seller make the same claim there, probably last used in September of last year, possibly October. We try to keep ours open in October for a week, just so that we can say that we did. And then the lawn sprinkler system, the same thing. Those are all winterized during the winter. Also, we can't really test it until the chance of freezing has passed. And so asking the seller to let us know the last time that the sprinkler system was in use, again, usually in September or so. So again, I like to see these. I ask all of my sellers during these months to fill this out, but not every agent does that. So this is something that you can, a good point for me to make here on this. This is something that you can certainly ask of the seller when you're making your offer or before. But you can certainly ask the seller during the offer time to complete this. One warning that I might give there, because I've seen this come through too. You can go ahead and fill in the header. You'll have the seller's name from the seller's disclosure, we hope, or whatever you put on the contract document itself. You fill in your buyer's name and the property address. You can't touch anything else, because this is something that we're asking the seller to complete, but you can certainly complete the header there. Don't have your buyer sign it. Don't have your buyer sign anything that is not complete ever. And so that would pertain to this. And certainly don't include this as an addenda on the contract. Don't put it on page 2, paragraph 2 yet, if it's not complete. We can add it later. Oh my gosh, either during the counteroffer period or as an amendment. There you go. So because and here's why it would have to be an amendment. See, I love the little rabbit holes that these things take me down. Adding an addendum would have to be an amendment, because once after we have a contract, and that would be paragraph number 2 on the base contract, that we are adding an addendum. Okay, all right. So all that. Oh gosh, if that confuses you, just reach out to me. So don't have your buyer sign anything that's not complete. But you can certainly send it along with your offer and to the listing agent or to the seller, if the seller's unrepresented, and just say, hey, would you mind filling this out? And we will add it to the contract later. All right, but I still think that they're important this time of year because we still have easily another couple of months before we can safely test some of those things. So the cold weather waiver. So that's something that doesn't necessarily strengthen your offer, but that's where I'm headed to now are some of the items. And I know that you all talked about some of these in the launch 3612.3 over the last couple of weeks. But some of the documents that we can add, some terms that we can add to our contract to strengthen your offer a little bit. Maybe we can't really, maybe the buyer can't really offer more money, or maybe we don't think it's safe to offer more money. And what I mean by that is one of the forms we're going to talk about here is the appraisal waiver. And the buyer doesn't have extra money to provide for that appraisal gap, but maybe they're willing to take the property by waiving the inspections. You know, there are different ways without going up in price or offering cash that the buyer doesn't have. There are other ways to strengthen your offer. You can try to accommodate the seller's closing preferred closing time, whatever that the seller chooses for that. So different ways that you can strengthen your offer without necessarily going up in price. You may want to consider some of these things. So, I guess I will do these in alphabetical order because I didn't write down my list like I intended to. So the appraisal contingency addendum is one of those. Just had this come up. And here, let me hit this too, because I'm sure you talked about it in 3612.3, but, or in the launch training, but number one, these are great ways to strengthen your offer. Number two, be very careful though. And again, make sure that you understand what you're offering to your buyer and that your buyer understands them. Because I've also seen some of these used improperly, and then our buyers kind of gotten stuck when they didn't really understand the terms of what was going on here. So just the caveat there, just we encourage them. And we are in a market where sometimes we do need to be able to strengthen our offer. We're still in a competitive market in certain price ranges and certain areas. So be mindful of that. I know as new agents, and you're out there showing and you hear us talk about all of these things and you want to throw everything against the wall and see if it sticks. But look at the market. If everything else is, in that area and this property's been on the market for 56 days, you may not need to strengthen your offer. Talk with the listing agent, see if they've had any other offers. They're not supposed to lie to you. So if they have other offers in hand or if they've got anybody else circling around. But I also will say this, that Murphy's Law says that property's been on the market for 56 days and suddenly there'll be 4 people interested in it. That is what happens in real estate. So don't think that the other agent is trying to bluff you if they do say, yeah, as a matter of fact, I just received another offer. So there, be mindful of what's going on. And do you really need to add some of these things to strengthen your offer, because you might not need to. So the appraisal contingency addendum. We use this because in our contract, in paragraph, oh gosh, I forgot my paragraph number there, but we have our appraisal paragraph. And the appraisal paragraph says that the lender is probably going to require an appraisal, but a cash buyer is also entitled to do an appraisal, and there's a time frame in there. I usually try to time that right along with the inspection period. However, there are those situations, even on cash buyer, where you want to get through the inspection period before you order the appraisal. But, and we certainly try to work that out when the buyer's getting a loan on the property. We allow our 10 days or whatever is mutually agreed upon for our inspection period, and then start our appraisal. The appraisal period is really not specifically dealt with in the contract, but that's all I get. Linda, don't get off on a sidetrack there. So, all right. So all parties, all buyers are entitled to an appraisal. So what happens when that appraisal comes back lower than our sales price? So a very important concept for you to remember, to keep in mind here, is that if the buyer's getting a loan, the lender will only lend on the lesser of the appraised value or the sales price. So if the appraisal comes back lower than our sales price, oh, see, I'm saying things a little bit backwards here. Hold on here. All right. So, that wasn't wrong. So if the appraisal comes back lower than the sales price, which is typical in those really competitive markets when we've had, the property came on at 5.25 and offers have, gone up to 570. It could be a real challenge for that appraisal to come back at that sales price at 570, but that's the sales price that the two parties have agreed on. So if the appraisal comes back, and let's say even in that situation, it comes back at, luckily at 540. So we now have what we call the appraisal gap between the 540 appraised value and the 570 agreed upon sales price. That's our appraisal gap. And so that's what the appraisal contingency addendum is all about here. So our seller, back to the document itself, we have our seller identified, we have our buyer identified, and the property identified with the full street address here. Then I am going to read this one. We are going to take a break here in a few minutes. Except for the changes noted below, all of the other provisions of the contract and appraised value contingency paragraph shall remain in full effect. The parties agree that the appraised value contingency provision contained in the appraised value contingency paragraph of the residential real estate contract is amended as follows, and then we have to check one of the paragraphs below. Paragraph number 1. If the appraised value is less than the purchase price, so my 540 appraised value, 570 sale price, the buyer agrees to pay the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value up to an amount not to exceed, and then the blank here is our additional amount. So breaking that down, in this situation, our appraised value at 540, sale price at 570. This is a form that we use going into our negotiations. This is something that your buyer would provide at the offer time. They send this right along with their offer of 570. What they're saying here is, okay, so we think that the appraisal might come in below that. I will bring additional money to the table to cover some or all of that gap. They don't have to necessarily cover that full gap. And at offer time, we don't know what that gap's going to be. We just think that there probably is going to be a gap, or there's a good chance of it. So the buyer can say, I've got 10,000 extra dollars to bring that I will bring, or 20. Whatever the buyer has, and make sure that you can provide proof of those funds. The listing agent probably will ask for the proof of those funds, in addition to, what all of the pre-approval letter and what the lender has approved for the down payment. These are over and above down payment and anything else that the buyer is going to be bringing to the table. Loan costs and those closing costs, those kinds of things. So on line 13 is where we would put that additional money, the $10,000, the $20,000, whatever. And I'm talking about lenders, but I also, going back to that cash buyer, absolutely the same thing. Even though we're not going to have a lender appraisal, if the buyer's going to have an appraisal done, they can use this too. It would be far less common for that, but it is a protection for both parties. typically speaking, if it's a cash buyer and they're going to be doing this form, they won't even have an appraisal done. They don't really care. But I have seen it happen though too. So, but for the most part, it wouldn't. So then the second part of that first paragraph, if the purchase price exceeds the sum of the final appraised value and the additional amount, then buyer and seller will have blank calendar days, 5 days if left blank, after seller's receipt of buyer's appraisal, appraised negotiation period, to reach an agreement, but only as to that difference that exceeds the additional amount. I'll come back to that. During this period, seller or buyer may seek a reconsideration of value by the appraiser. If such reconsideration finds a value that together with the additional amount is equal to or greater than the purchase price, then the transaction will move forward to closing. Wanted to include all of that because it's all inclusive there. All right, so if the purchase price exceeds the sum of the final appraised value and the additional amount, that's why. So let's say in our offer, the buyer said, okay, I'll bring 10,000 extra dollars to the table. So that would bring us up to that 550 basically, but we still have then that gap of $20,000. When this appraised value comes in less, because remember, to begin with, only the buyer knows this. The buyer is the one that gets the appraisal. The lender gets it first, but then they talk with the buyer about it. And the lender's going to say, hey, the appraisal came in low. What's going to happen? Our contract allows for a renegotiation of everything in there, but the appraised value contingency takes that away. The appraised value contingency addendum here, because this really is an addendum to our offer, takes away that ability. But what it adds back in here is, okay, so the $10,000 that the buyer offered to begin with doesn't cover our gap. We now have 5 days to determine what's going to happen with that gap, right? The buyer's already committed to bringing that extra $10,000. Now we're going to see, and any number of things can happen, basically 3. The seller can come down to that 550. As the market is softening, that's probably what we're going to see a little bit more of. Okay, I don't have any other offers. We know that this is going to be the appraisal that all other future appraisers are going to be seeing. So seller might agree to come down to that 550. Or the seller can certainly stand firm on their 570 agreed upon sale price, because maybe they do have 3 backup offers. And maybe some of those are even more than this that have completely waived the appraisal. So, so buyer can, or seller can either come down to that appraised value plus the extra amount, or stand firm there, or we could meet somewhere in the middle. If the buyer does have extra funds that they could bring and the 2 parties negotiate, well, how about a 560? Buyer, if you want to bring an extra $10,000 to the table, seller will come down at $10,000. So that's what those 2 parts of that paragraph add back into, even though we took it out by submitting this form, we took it out of our contract, it adds it back in here in case we do still have that gap. If we don't come to, and let me talk about the reconsideration. And again, the part of our paragraph, our appraisal paragraph in the contract, but if it comes in low, we can always ask the appraiser for a reconsideration of value. Bear in mind that 2 things with that, it's going to be the same appraiser. You're asking that appraiser to rethink what they've already done in their report. So some appraisers take offense at that. So be careful how you word it. And I would only do this because you're going to have then the appraisal report in front of you, and you're going to see what they used as comps and how they arrived at this low price. Only if you can legitimately point out to them, hey, when I did my market analysis, I used this property, and make sure that it's a good comp. Or if the listing agent didn't provide to the appraiser that list of updates, things that the seller's done in the last couple of years that made it show and present much better than the comps that the appraiser used. So make sure that you have a good, valid reason for asking for reconsideration, not just because you're not happy with the result. If you've done your job from the buyer or seller standpoint, you're probably not going to be surprised if that appraised value comes in less than the agreed upon sale price. So just to make sure, because again, I have seen, believe it or not, folks, I've seen appraisers, because keep in mind that appraisers are appraisers because it's not because they like people, it's because they like numbers. And so I've seen appraisers become very offended, take umbrage at the fact that you've questioned their work. And then when they say, sure, I'll give you a reconsideration, and then it comes back even lower. So I've seen it happen. Doesn't happen often, but I've seen it happen. So make sure that you are doing the right thing for both buyer and seller. We just had a kind of the opposite side of that, though. This is my own personal, my husband's working on it, but we had an appraiser reach out to it's our buyers, and the appraiser reached out to the listing agent. I'm assuming that it's going to come in low, but the appraiser reached out and said, hey, do you have a way of justifying your price to me? So you will run across that too. And so of course the listing agent called us as well, but that's really the listing agent's job. But that's okay. Happy to work together. That's all right. All right, paragraph number 2, and we're going to take our break here in just a minute. If the appraised value was less than the purchase price, the buyer agrees to pay the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value, waiving the right to renegotiate based on the appraised value. So this would be, going back to our example, we kind of thought the appraisal would come in lower, but we didn't know how much lower at offer time. Appraised value at $540, purchase price at $570. If we checked paragraph number 2, that means that the buyer is bringing $30,000 additional money to the table. There's no renegotiation. There's no cap on that. Okay. And then paragraph number 3, this would be, again, only on cash. We cannot make this promise, even if your lender has told you that they're going to waive the appraisal. And we've had some lenders do that on certain situations. Don't expect it unless your buyer's bringing a significant down payment to get a loan. It's certainly not going to happen on FHA, or USDA, or any federally related loan. Certainly not going to happen on a lender assisting the buyer with down payment program, but on a conventional loan with a significant down payment, some lenders have waived the appraisal requirement. Fannie Mae requires it. So in that particular situation, we know that lender is planning on keeping that loan forever and not selling it on the open market, because Fannie Mae does require an appraisal before they'll buy the note. So on a cash only buyer, we could check box number 3, and this is just again, a way to strengthen a cash offer, but the cash buyer is saying, I'm not going to do an appraisal. I know the contract allows me to, but I'm not going to do it. So those 3 options on here, we have to check one of those boxes if we are going to provide this. Make sure that your buyer is fully aware of the terms, is providing their own funds. Don't ever depend on a gift letter for this. I have seen that go bad here just recently too. So make sure that it's the buyer's own funds. Buyer shall provide seller with written verification of funds sufficient to confirm buyer's ability to perform their duties and obligations within blank calendar days, 5 days of the effective date of the contract. So again, you are going to have to provide proof of funds for that. A little harder to do when we're checking box number 2, but absolutely if you're checking box number 1. But even to box number 2, as the listing agent, I would say, hey, I want to see if they can bring $30,000, because I'm not sure it's going to appraise over 540. So perfectly within our rights to do that from the listing point of view. Buyers advised to consult their lender, other financial or legal consultants, and understands the risks involved with this addendum. Buyer releases all brokers and licensees from liability related to value of the property and this addendum. So there's our hold harmless clauses. It applies to this, such as they are. So again, this is usually provided as a part of an offer. So your buyer's going to sign, all buyers are going to sign that and send it along with. Absolutely, when you have filled this out, so absolutely add that on paragraph 2, page 2 of the addenda. of the offer. So, and call it the appraisal contingency addendum. Anytime that you are adding something on page 2, paragraph 2, address it as it is addressed at the top of the document itself. All right, so because Linda's teaching, we get a 10-minute break. So it's 8:56. I will see you all in 10 minutes. Okay, we're back. Give everyone a minute to get back. Oh, wait a minute. I've got someone that had said something in here. Oh, thanks, Megan. Okay, it's just Megan talking to everyone. All right, cool. All right. So, I'll get back to sharing my screen. And we were finished with the appraisal contingency addendum. The other one that I wanted to talk about for sure this morning, again, because I'm pretty sure that you all talked about this one in launch, in its present condition, want to hit on that. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this one too, because I've had, over the last few weeks, I've had agents say, oh, I didn't realize that it said that, or, oh, I didn't realize that that's what that was. So, once again, don't send anything to anyone for signatures that you don't understand. Make sure that you have read it and you understand it. If you don't understand it, talk to your coach, talk to me, right? Okay. Loop or Zoom is being weird this morning. So, all right. So the in its present condition addendum. Just to kind of, again, confuse things, but maybe clarify some things. In its present condition is the name of the addendum. Some agents will call it the as-is addendum. We don't have an as-is addendum. We have an in its present condition addendum. Some people will call it the inspection waiver addendum. We don't have an inspection waiver addendum. We have an in its present condition addendum. All right, so it might, if someone's calling it something and it doesn't seem to ring true to you, just think, well, what is it they're trying to say? In its present condition covers an awful lot of things here. So in its present condition addendum, when you are looking at a property from the buyer's perspective, when you're working with the buyer and you're looking in MLS, and one of these shows up that's in the view documents tab on the MLS full information, and you pull it up and it's checked. We've already got a box checked, box number 1, box number 2. Usually, well, I don't see one completed by the seller to begin with, this box number 3, usually box number 1, but it's already checked and signed by the seller. Is your buyer obligated to accept that? No. Everything's negotiable. This is just something that the seller is a good indication that this is what the seller wants, but everything's negotiable. So don't feel that just because something is already there and filled in on the in its present condition and your buyer doesn't want it, don't assume that you can't continue on with that property. So everything's negotiable. This is a term. All right, so there's that I wanted to cover. Then it can certainly be used to strengthen a buyer's offer. I'm just going to give you my own personal opinion here. I think it's a little bit overused. It was used quite a bit during the real heavy market that we had, now a couple of years ago, for a few years, when, every single property, regardless of where it was and what the price was. One of these was just kind of almost expected because there were 17 offers. They all had an in its present condition addendum. I kind of got that. I didn't like it even then, but kind of got it. Now, and I do know, as I said earlier, I do know that we are still in a competitive market in some areas and some price ranges. I still think that this is overused. You are taking a huge protection away from your buyer if they are including this in their offer, which again, very important for you to have this conversation with them. So, because now we're going to talk about the terms of it. Oh, and let me tell you too, that we've had problems. We have been involved in lawsuits because, number one, this was used kind of, on every offer. Number two, the buyers truly didn't understand what they were signing, which is our fault if they don't understand it. And number three, just because when something goes wrong, buyers have to blame somebody, and guess who's first in line there? Either the seller, and then of course, if the seller's involved, we're going to get involved too, regardless of which side we are representing. Because if the seller's going to get sued, then their attorney's going to make sure that the brokers are being sued too. So there have been lawsuits, and not everything's gone to court. I don't mean that, but we've just had problems because of this addendum. So just make sure that and we've got it for a reason, and it serves a really good purpose. But just I don't like the fact that almost every offer that I see going out now still includes this. I don't think it's necessary. So in all situations. So in its present condition addendum, of course, we have our KCRAR. This is a KCRAR form. So we have got their logo up in the top left-hand corner. The seller is identified. Again, go ahead and use their legal name and their marital status. Same thing with the buyer. And then the property address identified by the street address, full address, house number, street name, city, state, zip code. All right. This addendum modifies the inspection section of the contract. The property is being sold in its present condition, which includes all latent and patent defects and conditions. Definition of latent means it's not obvious now, but will be later. Patent means it's obvious now. Except as herein expressly stated, seller makes no warranty, expressed or implied, including without limitation, any implied warranty of merchantability or fitness for any particular purpose. Okay. So box number one, and that's how you will always hear people referring to this form. I've got the IIPC, because we are so busy, we can't use all of those long words in its present condition. So the IIPC, box number one. That's how you will always hear this referred to. All right. Which box number is being checked? Line 10, box number one. Buyer is entitled to conduct inspections as outlined in the inspections paragraph of the contract. Seller will make no repairs and or treatments. That takes away one huge thing that's in paragraph 13 of our contract, which is the inspections paragraph, that if during the wood destroying pest inspection, I'm trying to get away from saying termite inspection all the time, the wood destroying pest inspection, there is evidence of wood destroying pests, either current activity or past activity, and there's no evidence of any treatment, then the inspector is probably going to recommend treatment. Our contract, paid paragraph number 13, says that the seller will pay for the treatment. That's our contract. Box number one here takes that away. Seller will make no repairs or treatments. All right, so one really big thing there that's been taken away. Buyer, and bear in mind too, the buyers that you're working with, FHA, VA, USDA, all take wood destroying insects really seriously. They won't approve a loan that on which a termite activity, wood destroying insect activity is evident. So if you're working with an FHA buyer, I'm not really sure that you should even be dealing with this form at all. But conventional or cash, a little bit different thing. But just
Linda?
realize that you're taking away that protection from the buyer. Line number 12, buyer will have the right to cancel the contract during the inspection period if the results of the inspections are unsatisfactory. Okay. Line number 14, buyer waives any right to negotiate. There is no inspection renegotiation period pursuant to the inspection provisions in the contract. No right to renegotiate. The buyer will be taken, they can do their inspections and they can cancel, but otherwise they're taking the property as it is. Last month, we talked about the resolution and the kinds of things that we are concerned about on our resolution of unacceptable conditions: health concerns, safety concerns, and structural integrity concerns. The buyer giving up their right to renegotiate here in box number one takes away all of that. And what it doesn't remove, and once again, I don't think you should be using this form, what it doesn't remove is any appraisal requirements that show up, and we deal with that in our contract too. That's a whole separate issue. But anything that shows up on inspections, they can cancel, but they can't renegotiate. And I have agents ask me all the time, well, can we ask the seller to renegotiate? Well, sure, but the minute you do, you've pretty much negated, now verbally, yes, but the minute that you do in anything written, you have now really broken the terms of the contract. Your buyer has now breached the contract. So don't ever just put something in an amendment that, oh, seller agrees to do something, because that is a breach of the terms of this form, which is part of our contract. What we do see happen occasionally, and I don't, it's just, if the buyer was to do this, why even do the form to begin with? But it all boils down to that. But but the buyer found something that they want to renegotiate. Well, you can ask the listing agent, do you think the seller would be willing to renegotiate? But once again, the minute that you put, and even if they indicate yes, but the minute you put something in writing that the buyer has signed and is now asking the seller to sign, it's really the buyer that's in breach of contract. They're breaking the terms of the contract. So just be real careful with this whole thing, but unless they're willing to cancel. Now, here's the absolute cleanest thing that could happen. The buyer does find something that they want, that they don't find acceptable to the property. They would still buy the property if the seller fixed it. Here's what I would do. I would call but we've got box number 1 of the IAPC checked. If I were representing that buyer, I would call the listing agent and say, hey, do you have any backup offers on this property? Or, the buyer's really just kind of thinking things through. Do you have any backup offers? They're not supposed to lie to you. So if they say no, here's which would be the preferred answer. If they say yes, it's a whole different ballgame. I'll get back to that here in just a second. But if they say no, then no, we don't have any other offers. Then, well, number 1, make sure you're always asking that question before you write this form. But so if it wasn't that popular, why did you write this form? But Linda's little soapbox, get back to it. If they say no, then I would go back to my buyer and say, here's what you should do. We'll cancel this contract. We'll send a cancellation over. Once the seller has signed that, we will then write a new contract asking for this repair. And make any adjustments that you might feel necessary, to sweeten that deal or whatever. So there, yes. Can we write an amendment in which both parties agree to, and again, we cannot remove anything that's already part of our contract. We cannot remove this form from the contract. But what we can do is say that the buyer and seller acknowledge that the terms of the IIPC no longer apply. All right, we can't say we're taking this contract out. We're taking this part of out of the contract. It's already there. We can't take it out, but we can change the terms of it. So, okay. So Linda's made a whole long thing about that, but I think justifiably so. Make sure, number 1, that the form is necessary. Make sure that the buyers understand it and what they're giving up, even in box number 1, which seems innocent enough. All right, because believe me, folks, those buyers, even they say, oh, no, we love the house, we'll buy it, whatever. Once those inspection reports come back, buyers change their mind about things. And your buyer may have gotten cold feet. Maybe they did the appraisal waiver also, here. Maybe they feel that they've offered way too much, but you've really kind of taken away their ability. Again, they can cancel the contract legitimately here. But you've kind of taken away some of their really strong negotiating points by using this form at all. So that's box number 1. They can cancel but can't renegotiate, giving up any repairs or treatments by the seller. Box number 2. Buyers entitled to conduct inspections for informational purposes only. Seller will make no repairs and or treatments. Buyer waives any right to cancel the contract pursuant to the inspection provisions. Buyer waives any right to renegotiate. So buyer can do their inspections, but doesn't really matter because they have given up all of their rights. They cannot cancel the contract, nor can they renegotiate the contract. That sounds pretty dangerous to me. but that's just me. All right. But we always do what our buyers want to do, of course, of course, of course. But our job is to let them know what their options are and the possible outcomes of any decision they make. That's why we hold these classes, because as new agents, you're not aware of all of the possible outcomes. Megan and I are not aware of all of the possible outcomes. We're surprised every day by what people decide to do. But you need to present to them as best you can. That's your skill and care. That's the care of your fiduciary duties, is letting them know what can possibly happen if they decide to go this route. Then box number three, buyer waives any right to conduct inspections as outlined in the inspection paragraph of the contract. Seller will make no repairs and or treatments. Buyer waives any right to cancel or renegotiate pursuant. Can't even do inspections. There are certainly times when this would be applicable. If your client or customer, the buyer, is a contractor, and they pretty much have done their inspection as they went through and looked at the property, all right. If they are a very seasoned investor, and they have contractors, but they know what to look for, yeah, okay, right? Or they want to do their own inspection, that kind of thing. But our regular buyers that only buy 2 or 3 houses in their lifetime, this is a really bad choice, I think. It's there, it's there for a reason, and of course does apply in some situations. But I think I've probably driven my point home that I'm not a big fan of this form. There are certainly times when it's very appropriate and applicable, but I think it's overused. So make sure that you're talking with your coach about the situation. If you're not in competition with other offers, why even do this? Right? Yes, I know it's an indication, and yes, that your buyer's strong, but don't take all of your buyer's rights away. The very bottom of this, I don't want to gloss it over because I do think it's all important. It is understood by all parties that the sale of the property in its present condition does not relieve the seller of the obligation to disclose all material facts of which seller has knowledge relating to the condition of the property. We do still expect to see a seller's disclosure. And that it should be properly filled out. So if you're working with this, okay, well, let me get back to something real quick that I started the thought on. So if you are the buyer, the seller's already provided this, and this is part of the MLS documents. Does your buyer have to sign this? Absolutely not. It is a negotiable term. I think it is perfectly okay for the agent working with the buyer to indicate to the listing agent or the seller, if they're not represented, my buyer, they're not going to nickel and dime you. And in fact, what we can do is waive the first couple of $1,000s of repairs. But my buyer's really not willing to go any further than that. Absolutely. And negotiate those things. You could even write that into the contract and additional terms and conditions, paragraph 1D. All of those things can be done without using this form. But we do, and if you have a seller, because here's my problem with this. I think it's the agents that are suggesting to their sellers, hey, let's go ahead and put this in. Your buyer does not have to sign it. It certainly can be negotiated out and make the offer without it, right? See what happens. So, but we do expect, so I don't think we should suggest to a seller that we do this, but again, every agent's going to do their business the way they want to do it. Just because I think from that point of view, I think that you might be getting, you might have buyers that, oh, well, they've got this and I'm not willing to sign that, so I'm not going to make an offer on it. So there's 2 sides to everything on here, but we do always expect to see a completed, accurate seller's disclosure. Buyer's advice that various professional inspections are available and advisable. Buyer's waiver of any right to inspection is the buyer's decision alone. All parties indemnify and hold harmless seller, broker, and brokers, affiliated licensees, agents, and employees from any liability or obligations resulting from or connection with this decision. And once again, that's our hold harmless, which we have in every single document, but I know that we've been dragged into things too. So the hold harmless really doesn't have much teeth or many teeth in there. Seller understands and agrees that the property will be delivered to the buyer in the same condition and state of repair as at the time of agreement, and seller is still responsible to care for the property through the possession date as outlined in the condition, maintenance, and inspections of the property section of the residential real estate sale contract. So once again, this does not relieve the seller of the responsibility of letting us know if something happens between contract and closing, though that that dead tree falls in the backyard, you should really let us know. Certainly let us know if that dead tree falls on the garage and, breaks the roof in. So doesn't relieve the seller of any disclosures. So still expect to see the property condition and then a notification of anything else that should happen there. So once again, the party that's responsible for initiating this would be the one that would sign it. If it wasn't part of the MLS documents, our buyer's going to sign it. We would name it as in its present condition in paragraph 2, page 2 of the contract. If it is the seller that has provided it and your buyer is okay with signing everything along with all of your disclosures and disclaimers there, then make sure that you check the box on page 2, paragraph 2, that it's included and have your buyer sign it as part of the contract. All right, so the in its present condition addendum, there you have that. One other form, and we've got plenty of time to talk about it, because this is coming up more and more in our negotiations these days. Even though there are some very competitive areas and price ranges in our market, there are a lot of places and a lot of price ranges where our market is softening a little bit. And so I'm going to talk about our contingency for sale and or closing of buyer's property. I'm seeing a lot of these being offered and a lot of these being accepted. So I think it's a really important concept and form for you all to understand. So we use this form when our buyer has a current property that they own that they have to get the funds from, the proceeds from the sale before they can move on to purchase this new property. We're making an offer on a property now, but the buyer can only, that's what contingency means, only if the buyer can purchase this property only if they get the proceeds from their current property. It is called the contingency for the sale and or closing of the buyer's property addendum, because we can use this at two different ways. It's all for the same end, but at two different times, I guess is really what I should say. So number one, when our buyer does not have their house currently on the market, or if it is currently on the market, but not under contract, we are dependent upon the sale and closing of the buyer's property. If it's not yet on the market, or if it's on the market but not yet under contract, sale and closing. If our buyer decided to wait until they were under contract to go out and start looking for properties, so their current property already has a contract on it, now we're just dependent on the closing of. All right, so both of those, all three of those situations are covered by this one document. All right, so here we go. It's a KCRAR document. The KCRAR logo is in the top left-hand corner. We have our seller identified. Again, go ahead and use their full legal name and marital status here. Buyer, full legal name and marital status here. And the property of the address for which we are writing the offer, our new property for our buyer. All right, the contract is contingent upon the sale and or closing of buyer's property located at. And this is in the end of line 8, it tells you this is the buyer's current property that we have to get the proceeds from before we can buy X1, 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street. All right, so we are identifying the buyer's property on line 7 and 8 by street address. Again, complete street address. We don't have to use legal description here. Complete street address is absolutely fine, but make sure you're including the full address. House number, street name, city, state, zip code. All right. Like going on to line number 9, which is or will be listed for sale with. And then on the rest of line number 9 is identifying either the broker they're going to be listing with or for sale by owner. For sale by owner is going to really, really weaken this offer, because the listing agent is going to say, oh, it's a for sale by owner, right? And listing agent's got the ear of the seller. So for sale by owner is going to weaken it. However, some buyers, that's the only way they're going to do this, right? Or we really hope, the expectation and hope is that it's going to be KW and KC Metro that's going to be on line 9. So either they have already listed it with you, or they will be listing it with you, or they're going to be listing for sale by owner. We really, really hope that they're not listing with another broker, but if they are, then because here's the thing, folks, right? We can always have, they can be listed with Reese Nichols, but use you as their buyer's agent. Maybe that Reese Nichols agent isn't treating them the way that they think they should, and we certainly can't tell them they can break that contract, but if they're not under buyer agency contract, they can certainly use us. So it could happen, not very common, but it could happen. Now, that's here locally. If you are working with buyers that are moving from out of town, then you put whoever they're going to be listing with up there, or, you know, out there, wherever they're coming from. So, all right. So on or before the date. This has come up a few times here. If they're not currently on the market and still have some things to do before they're going to go on the market, you put their on market date here, which could be a week from today.
No, I'm okay.
I wouldn't go any further in the future than that, because, you know, why should the seller take their house off the market when you are still a month away from going on? So and no guarantees for that. So I'd make it that a really short period of time. If it's going to be more than a day or two, I think that you owe it, again, depending on what your buyer wants to do and what their exact situation is, but the seller is probably going to want to know why you're not going on immediately, for them to take their house off the market, because that's really what happens to the seller. Once they have accepted a contingency offer, absolutely, yes, MLS says that we still allow showings, and because that's a status, they have to change to the status of contingency, but it really, really, really will cut down on their showings considerably. And we hope that their agent has told them that, or not. I mean, from our point of view, we don't care, but the seller may question all of these things. So certainly if they're not on the market yet, we can put a date in the future. That's what it allows for. If they're already on the market, just go ahead and put today's date, because it says which will be listed for sale with, on, or before. So if it was listed before today's date, then we covered that. So if it's already been on the market for a couple of days, and that's great. That's kind of the best case scenario there, without it actually being under contract yet. But it went on the market yesterday. We now found this property. We're ready to put the offer on. Maybe we found this property a couple of days ago, went on the market because we, you know, now we're contingent for the sale and closing, and we're on the market. And that's best possible scenario, I think, because now you can say, oh my gosh, we went on the market yesterday. We've already had 12 showings on it. We're positive that we're going to be under contract within the next, 24 hours. I've had 3 agents already contact me. So passing all of that along, being able to say, this is the activity we've had, and we just haven't come to our final sale price yet. All right. So I think that's best possible worlds. However, not as good really as already being under contract, but we'll get to that. All right. So make sure that you're identifying the property, who and when it's going to go on the market. If it's already on the market, just use today's date for that. Because here's the reason why, and I know this came up a while back. If it's been on the market for 30 days, I'm not sure that I want to bring that to the attention of the listing agent and the seller. It's been on the market for 30 days and we don't have a contract on it. To me, that's like, well, okay, I don't know if we're going to take our house off the market for you or not. Maybe you need to reduce the price. And that's what opens all of this up. Well, I'll get to that at the end of the form, but it opens all a negotiation between all parties there is really kind of what it leads to. All right, so then on line 12, check and complete the applicable contingency. Number 1, below closing, or number 2, below sale and closing. All right, so If we are already under contract, already have a contract, then we would check box number 1. So we're just contingent on the closing. Oh, who came in? Brooke. Oh, Brooke must have gotten kicked off somehow. All right, so contingent on the closing. Buyer's property is currently under contract with the closing date that permits buyer to purchase seller's property by the closing date in this contract. This option does not include seller kickout rights. We'll get to the seller kickout rights here in just a few minutes. So, all right, so we're contingent on closing because we have a contract. Okay, our current property is 1234 Main Street. The property that we are making our offer on is 234 Elm Street. So 1234 Main Street has a contract. We have a closing date already set for, and I'm not looking at a calendar, so just forgive me if this is on a Saturday or a holiday, but on April 27th. All right, that's plenty of time. We've got 30 days and 10, we've got 40 days here. We're already under contract, contingent on the closing here. We would check this box that allows us plenty of time to purchase this property. All right, so what we want to do though, we're closing on our 1234 Main Street on the 27th. We'll close on this one on the 28th. Right, because we need the funds from that one before we can close on this one. All right, keep all of that in mind because we're going to circle back around to that. All right, however, we are then also letting the seller of 234 Elm Street know that we are under contract and we have already completed all of these terms of that contract on our current property. We've got the contract, we've got the approval letter, we've already been through the inspection period, and we have negotiated all inspections. We are finished with all of those contingencies. The only contingency left for the buyer on our current property, 1234 Main Street, is the actually closing, the commitment letter. We've checked off all of the boxes and everything is looking really good now. The pre-approval letter is you know, kind of our indication that we are going to get to closing, but it's not a guarantee. All right. If we just went under contract on our current property yet today or yesterday, and none of these other things have been completed yet, we only check what's applicable, right? All that we could really check in that case that we just went under contract yesterday is the box on line 20, that we've got a contract and that we have the pre-approval letter for that buyer, that we haven't done our inspections yet. We do in the following paragraph down here. We would also need to let them know if there are any other contingencies. I shouldn't have skipped over line 25. Those are the ones that we've dealt with that are listed out are the ones that are listed out specifically in our in the contract. If there are any other contingencies that the buyer that we agreed to on 1234 Main Street, we'd have to let this seller know about those. So, you know, that's again, you know, those contingencies, you know, might be, you know, something that's probably already been waived or could easily be waived, approval of another family member or something like that. But so take care of those before you write this would be my suggestion. At line 27, buyer agrees to keep seller timely informed of the closing status of buyer's property. Should it become evident the buyer's property will not close within the above time frame, buyer will inform seller immediately and seller or buyer may cancel this contract. Unfortunately, we've had this happen more than once over, you know, in the last 30 days here at the brokerage within launch. And so make sure that you are keeping this seller, 234 Elm Street, aware of what's going on that contract on your current property, 1234 Main Street. We are under legal obligation to do that. If we can see that that's not going to close, if we fail to renegotiate successfully any unacceptable conditions after the buyer's inspections, seller needs to know what's going on here. And seller needs to, other side of that is seller needs to know every time we check another box there. I would let the listing agent representing the seller of 234 Elm Street. Okay, we've done our inspections. Inspections are done. We have kind of successfully renegotiated all repairs, and we've successfully had the appraisal came back just fine. So I would just let, you know, make sure that the seller seller or listing agent knows everything all along the way, good or bad, because we're under that obligation. Box number 2. So that box number 1 is if we are already under contract, regardless of how long ago or how immediate that was, we're already under contract. Box number 2, we are contingent on the sale and closing. Either we're not yet on the market or we're on the market and we don't yet have any offers. Buyer's property is not currently under contract. Buyer's property must be under contract within. And so think about what this sentence is saying. We're not under contract here, so we can't promise to close you, seller, on 234 Elm Street within the next 30 days. That's probably not going to happen. So we want on the contract we're offering you, on the offer we're making to you, we're probably going to, that's why we're asking for a 60-day close, because we need to be under contract and allow for that on 1234 Main Street. And you'll see that there on line 33, we have our default of 30 days there. I think that if you're not under contract, I think that's the minimum that you should have. If you're not already under contract and you've been on for a few days and not seeing a ton of activity on it, allow at least this. There's nothing wrong with asking for a little more time, 45 days, whatever you think is realistically going to get you under contract. Okay, and that's what this line is about, not the closing on that date, but being under on that contract, but the being under contract, that you have successfully negotiated a contract within 30 days is our default. Put in there whatever you think is reasonable. Shortening it might not be a real good idea. All right, from the effective date of this contract, the contract deadline with a closing date that permits buyer to purchase the property. So that's why, if we're allowing 30 days here, that's why we're asking on 234 Main Street for a 60-day closing, because we want to allow to get under contract and allow that contract to close. Then we might have to negotiate 1234 Main Street closing day to be a day or two ahead of this one. Bearing in mind, folks, that all of this can be renegotiated, but they don't have to be. Anytime that you're asking the seller to renegotiate something, you're taking the chance that they're going to say no and I'm done with you, right? So make sure that you are, as always, and here's a really important point, it's always better to put lengthy time frames on things, because it's so much better to shorten them than it is to try to lengthen them, then, to shorten them now and then try to lengthen them later. So make sure that all of these dates are allowing enough time and that they all mesh together and work well together. I know, for some of you, this is, it's like at this point, I have no idea what Linda's even talking about or what she's saying. I get it. Just bear in mind that if your buyer has to sell their current property to buy one, you need to talk to me or your coach or Kristen or Lynn. We'll get you through this form. All right, on line 34, if buyer's property is not under contract by the contract deadline, either party may cancel this contract. Keep that in mind. The seller can unilaterally cancel if you haven't met the terms of this. If buyer's property is under contract after the contract deadline, but before either party cancel this contract, then neither party will have the right to cancel due solely to the buyer's failure to meet the contract deadline. So again, timely notice of everything. If you have a contract, make sure that you're making on your current property on 1234 Main Street, make sure that you let this listing agent know, oh my gosh, we're under contract and here's what we're doing now. The inspections, the appraisal, etc. Paragraph number 2, and it's in bold there, it says right there, this option includes seller kickout rights. So that must be pretty important because it's in bold. Moving on to paragraph 2A, if at any time prior to buyer getting buyer's property under contract, seller accepts another offer on the property, we would call that the backup contract. Seller will provide buyer with signed kickout notice or notice of backup contract form. Yes, we have a whole different document for that, of seller's intent to cancel this contract. If buyer wishes to continue with this contract, buyer will comply with one of the 2 options below. First, let's deconstruct that paragraph. If the seller accepts this offer with this contingency on it, as I said a few minutes ago, the status will change in MLS to C instead of A for active, B for backup, or P for pending. It's going to be C for contingency. we can still, anybody can still show properties that are marked as C for contingency. That is our indication. All that's saying is that the seller has accepted an offer, but they are sure willing to accept, to look at other offers. Okay? We can still show them. Showings will cut down considerably because, you know, some buyers will say, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to get involved in that. Some agents forget to look under that status when they're looking for properties to show their buyers. So, you know, lots of reasons why the showings will slow down considerably for this seller, but they still can certainly happen. So sellers still allowing other showings, has to, as a matter of fact. And so now they've received another offer. They've received, doesn't even have to be better than this one. It's just not contingent. That makes it better. It might be for less money, but they're allowing you 60 days, you know, to get everything done. This is a cash buyer that's willing to close in 20 days. Well, that might work out a lot better for that seller. Or it could be for more money, or it could be for, you know, other terms that meet the seller's requirements a little better. Whatever reason, the seller can accept that offer. At this moment in time, that is considered a backup offer because the seller's under contract with us here. So, all right, that's a backup offer. Seller immediately notifies us, this buyer, that, hey, I've got a backup offer in place. You now have, and then that's what line 44 tells us, you have 2 calendar days, unless something has been, and calendar days, again, remember that's midnight to midnight, 2 days, 2 calendar days, unless we've negotiated a different term here, to do one of these 2 things. Provide seller with evidence the buyer's property is now under contract with the closing date that will permit buyer to purchase seller's property. Because again, you know, Murphy's Law says all of this is going to happen at the same time. However, if you've been under contract and you didn't let the seller know, that's not good. But again, things can happen very quickly at the same time. So let us know that number 1, that you are under contract, or number 2, provide seller with the following: an amendment or kick-out notice in response signed by the buyer stating the contingency for sale and or closing addendum is waived and removed from the contract. This means buyer will no longer have the right to cancel if buyer's property does not sell or close. And this is not an or, this is an and, evidence from a credible financial institution demonstrating buyer has sufficient funds and ability, either cash or financing, to close by the closing date of the contract without the sale of buyer's property. For the purposes of this section, if buyer does not have sufficient funds to purchase without financing, buyer must provide loan approval consistent with the financing provisions of the contract, is not dependent on or requires the sale of buyer's property to qualify the financing needed to purchase the property. So 2 options that the buyer has, they have to do within 48 hours. Provide the seller with evidence that they are under contract, or completely waive this contingency and prove that they didn't need it to begin with. All right, that's basically what that comes down to, that they have the funds to purchase with cash, or that their lender says, well, no, we will go ahead and give them the second loan, even without selling the first one. So most buyers are not in that position. There are some buyers that will absolutely make this contingent, even though they don't need it to be contingent. We've got a handful of buyers that will do that. So that'll pop up occasionally, but most buyers aren't going to be able to fulfill either one of those within a 48-hour period. Now, getting an offer, you know, now buyer, and talking to our buyer, okay, buyer, we have to get under contract within the next 48 hours. Now's the time to reduce your price. Now's the time to, you know, go back and maybe revisit that offer that you didn't accept 2 weeks ago because you didn't like the terms, you know, revisit those. So you got 48 hours because you do have to do that unless you have negotiated that a shorter or longer time period. So, but one of those 2 things has to happen. Either prove that you do have the property under contract and all of those other things still apply, or remove this contingency, waive this contingency completely. And that's what the seller kick-out rights are. That, so only that, it certainly does apply on paragraph number 2, or paragraph number 1, that the seller says, okay, I'm getting another offer. You've got 48 hours to complete your obligations here. Then we have subparagraph B, if buyer accepts an offer on buyer's property prior to receiving a kickout notice or cancellation from seller, buyer will notify seller of the contract on buyer's property, and the parties will be subject to the terms of paragraph 1 above in lieu of paragraph 2. So we weren't under contract, but now we are. And seller, here is our copy of our contract on 1234 Main Street. We are now removing everything here from paragraph 2, moving back up to paragraph 1. Right. Seller will notify buyer of the contract, buyer's property. Property will be subject to, I already read that. Buyer will provide seller with applicable documentation referenced in paragraph 1 as it becomes available. So once again, the contract itself, the inspection resolution, if necessary, any other documentation that would prove, yes, we are moving back to paragraph 1 here. And then all parties agree that upon removal of the contingency for the sale of the buyer's property, after delivery of a kickout notice response indicating buyer's intent and ability to proceed to closing, the earnest deposit is non-refundable. That is a huge thing that a lot of agents forget. This makes the earnest money non-refundable if we remove the contingency kickout. Right. All right, then our legal disclaimer there. We're at 1053. Since I talked about this, I'm now going to talk about, because back up here where it says that the seller has to prove to the buyer that they have received another offer, and it says right up here on line 41 and 42, the buyer with the signed kickout notice or notice of backup contract. So we're going to go look at that form. Oh, I was already there. Just briefly, so that if you find yourself with the listing doing all of this, or from the buyer's perspective that you, and has to go through the alphabet in her head while she's looking at things. Kickout notice, notice of backup contract, or if you're working with the buyer and you receive one of these, so that everybody understands what this is all about. So once again, the name tells you right there in the title, what it's all about. This is the kickout notice and notice of backup contract that the seller is giving to the buyer. The seller has accepted a contingency, buyer's sale or close current property, but the seller has now received another offer that they want to accept. That is at this for the next 48 hours. That's called the backup offer. All right. Identify the seller, identify the buyer, identify the property, the seller's property, by street address, and then again, have to reference the effective date of the contract. So you always need to know your effective dates. Seller hereby gives notice to buyer or licensee assisting the buyer of seller's receipt and acceptance of a backup contract to purchase the property. Pursuant to the provisions of the contract relating to the sale of buyer's property, buyer has blank calendar days as provided in the contract from the date of receipt of this notice to comply with the requirements for waiver of the contingency for sale and or closing of the buyer's property. Our blank there on line 11 has to match what was in the original contingency form. Shouldn't try to renegotiate this at this point in time. From the seller's perspective, seller, you can't shorten that. Say, oh, I know we gave you 48 hours before, now we're going to give you 24. No, it has to be for at least that period of time. Can that be renegotiated? Well, sure, but chances are the seller's not going to want to do that. Then we get to still on line 14, if buyer does not comply with the requirements or waiver within the time provided, the contract between seller and buyer is terminated, and seller may proceed with the backup contract and shall authorize refund of buyer's earnest money. So this doesn't allow the seller to tie up the buyer's earnest money. It says right there, the seller is agreeing to release it. So, but it also is saying that buyer, we are releasing you from the contract. We still have to have a cancellation of mutual release. Has to be signed by all parties. Can the buyer hang up the seller by not signing that cancellation? That's a great question for an attorney. If that ever happens to you, make sure you talk to, not me, not your coach, talk to Lynn or David about that. I always forget to bring David's name into that, but talk to Lynn about that. If you're a buyer saying, oh, I'm not releasing it, all right, when they understand that it can't be released until they sign it. So that's an attorney thing. That's a real problem there. So, and once again, this is usually going to be signed initiated by the seller because they're the ones sending the kickout notice. So they're going to sign everything here. Then certificate of delivery. You will notice that there is nowhere on here that the buyer signs. This is just the seller, right? Buyer doesn't have to agree to this. There's nothing for the buyer to agree to. But we do have to, just like on our inspection notice, we do have to complete when and how it was delivered. All right. So the person delivering the notice, that would be you, has to sign this also, because this is our evidence that it was delivered to. Now, again, I would dot loop, DocuSign, the sharing it with someone is a proof that they have received it. So so again, no place for the buyer to sign because there's nothing for the buyer to agree to. But there is a place here
Oh,
for you to sign. You are
so what
filling
would
this
we
out
put
if we're
there?
working with the seller. You're filling this out and filling out when and how it was delivered. Okay,
I,
so we're
I
close
had a
to end
quick
time
question.
here.
What would we put
Anybody
there? Just
have any questions over? I'm gonna stop share. Anything that we covered? I know some of those are kind of some pretty heavy documents there.
I have a question.
Ashley, hold on.
Oh,
I see you're talking. And things were coming through. Try it again.
okay. Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Yes, I can.
Yay. So what would we put there? Would we put just DocuSign or dot loop or
Yes,
electronically?
email, you're right. Electronic is fine. I usually put email /dot loop, but it doesn't
Okay.
matter because on anything, like anytime we are giving a great question, because anytime we are giving any kind of notice like this, you know, the inspection notice is kind of a different animal, but anytime we are giving notice that has to be done in a timely manner, I will try to send that as many different ways as I possibly can. I will
Okay.
it, send it through dot loop. I'll send a PDF through email. I will call them. I will text them, you know, all of that just to let them know. But yes,
Perfect.
whatever works. Yeah.
And then I had a question about the cold weather waiver form.
Okay.
So would just a good rule of thumb on that be that we're going to include it like November to April? And then
Yes.
obviously if it's been like an unseasonably warm November, then
Yes.
wait a little bit, but okay.
That is absolutely,
Cool.
yes. If it's not included, I would, and you're working with the buyer, I would absolutely include that with every offer I make. Hey, and again, there's no requirement there. It's just, it would be helpful. And,
It
you know,
just kind of covers you
yeah,
and helps.
exactly. And you've done your due diligence. And make sure but yeah, and on every listing that you take, try to remember to include that. So yes, great rule of thumb. Actually, I would even say that from October through April. So, yep. All right. I don't see that I had any other chats going on. Megan's still there. Megan, do you have anything that you want to add to anything that I've said?
Gosh. Well, we covered so much.
I know, we did.
Just that on those contingencies, I think more than anything, we have recently had a kick out notice. Jeff Nelson has experienced that. So it does happen. So just make sure you really do counsel your buyers that that is a definite possibility.
Right. Yeah, a
And to
lot of broken
be
hearts.
prepared for that.
Yeah, a lot of broken hearts.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody else has anything. So on Wednesday, the schedule on Wednesday from Wednesday's class is going over the buyer agency agreements and listing agreements. All of you are still very new enough that you probably do. So look them over. You know, you don't have to wait until these classes, you know, to look them over. I think all of you have access to Dot Loop at this point. So go in and look them over. Come to me with any questions that you specifically have. Oh, Danielle says, is the contracts challenge next Wednesday night? Yes, it is, Danielle. We will, great question. We will be going, we announce it on the first Wednesday, go over them on the fourth Wednesday. And so yes, next Wednesday, the 26th is the day that we will be looking at them. And I am a little bit behind on looking at any, if anyone's sent them to me, that's definitely on my schedule today. I'm going to be going in and looking at them. Please don't, and for those of you that haven't, and I think all three of you have asked for those, please don't wait until Wednesday to send that to me. You know, get it to me a day or two ahead of time, because what the whole point of it is that I'm going to go through them and make suggestions and corrections for you, so that then when it is presented on Wednesday night, you're going to have the perfect offer, right? You might be out negotiated on terms, but you're not going to be outmaneuvered on the contract. So don't wait until Wednesday afternoon to send those to me. And I know it's spring break week. I get it. I know. Just saw Ashley's little mini me show up there. So yeah, I know things get and things happen.
One of those weeks.
For the next week, right? So
Yes.
okay.
I have a question for Wednesday
Sure.
night. I saw that it's the orientation. So does that take the place of Wednesday Night Warriors, or do those happen like okay? So
In
plan to
addition to
come
it.
and then just I won't go to, if you've done that, then you don't go to that one.
Right.
Cool.
Yep.
Yay. Thanks.
Very good. All right. Thank you all for being here. Kudos to all of you. I'll make sure I didn't miss the chat. Okay, yep, I answered that. So, all right, I will see probably all of you Wednesday morning. If not, have a great week. Enjoy spring break. It's supposed to be decent weather. So, all right, everybody have fun out there.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye, Brooke.
Bye.
Hi, Linda.
Bye, Megan. So, Megan, if you have a minute, because now
I
it's
do.
just you and I. So, did you feel like crap all weekend?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll put my video on. I don't care if you see me, Lynn. I haven't had a shower yet this morning. No, I have. I mean, I've had COVID before, but I mean, this one wasn't as bad as the last time, but I've had a horrible headache the whole time, congestion, fatigue. I'll get up and I'll try to do something. I'm like, okay, I'm going back to bed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm on day 5, so I'm hoping by tomorrow I'll test negative at least, so I can start maybe coming back into the world.
You know, the last time, just to give you, bad news here. Last time when Jerry and I had it, which was over Labor Day weekend I tested negative after 3 days, and I felt fine, and it did not hit me hard at all. Felt like I had a cold. I've had colds worse than that. Jerry, it hit him like a Mack truck.
Yeah.
He tested positive for over a week.
Yeah.
He started on Saturday, tested positive. I mean, we didn't start until Wednesday or Thursday, until the next Monday, still tested positive. So
Yeah.
you just
never know.
Yeah, you
And
don't.
I thought Marco got it first, and he was like, oh my God, I've got this worst sore throat. And I'm like, you need to test. And he didn't. He just like hibernated in his office where he has a day bed for, 3 days. We didn't see it. So I'm pretty sure he had, and I got it from him. And I thought, well, I've just got his cold. But Thursday, because I was at the office all morning, I could feel the cold, but then you get that pressure in your face. Oh my God, my jaw started hurting. I'm like, no, I don't think this is just a cold. So by Friday, I felt really crappy. So then I tested, and I mean, it was 2 lines in like a minute. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And
I
then
didn't have to wait 10 minutes to see
it. When it's that fast, it's like, okay, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
Secondarily, how is your niece doing?
She's doing okay. It was scary as hell.
Yeah.
She had a pulmonary embolism.
Yes.
Oh my God. She has really bad cramps, and so they put her on birth control pills, which I thought was a bad decision for a 14-year-old, but I'm not her mother. And it created a blood clot. They're very serious. The birth control pills can cause blood clots. The younger you are, the more severe it is, because your body's just not hormonally balanced to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
So it created a pulmonary embolism. So they put her on. They kept put her on some kind of non-coagulant. And shockingly, they sent her home the next day. I was like, you don't monitor this? What if that thing bursts? I mean, it scares the shit out of me, but they let her go she's on blood thinners for 6 months.
Holy
And I asked her the day
cow.
she got home, I said, how you feeling? Better. I was like, honey, we just be careful. Blood thinners, make your blood thin. Don't cut yourself or get a bruise, or, you got to be really careful. But what happens? Well, it's hard to stop the bleeding. Oh, didn't anybody tell you this?
Oh my God.
I know they don't want to scare kids, but she's a 15-year-old kid. She needs to understand what's going on.
Right. Oh
So
my
we'll kind
gosh.
of see. So
Oh
I'm a
man.
little more nervous than I think her mother is about it.
Well, and is she scheduled to go back? I mean, are they going to check? Did they find that
They're
through a
supposed to do a
CAT scan?
follow-up in a month.
Okay.
I guess they run more blood work, and I guess based on the levels of whatever, they can see if the
Yeah.
blood clot's
Yeah.
diminishing or not.
Oh man,
So
poor
I know it's
thing.
frightening. I know.
Yes,
Scary stuff.
it
Yeah.
is scary stuff.
So that was a
Well,
long day.
oh yeah, exactly. And when you didn't feel well.
And yeah, the whole time I'm in the hospital going, God, I feel like crap. I'm getting worse. I'm getting worse. Somebody had to
Uh-huh.
ride down. They moved her from Menor to Children's Mercy for the treatments. We had to ride in the ambulance with her. I mean, it was an ordeal.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah, she, it was that concerning that they wouldn't let us drive her. They transferred her by ambulance to
Holy
Children's Mercy.
cow. That's not a day that you ever want to go through.
No,
Mhm.
no,
Mm.
no.
Well,
But thank you for asking. So
well, sure. And yeah, well, yeah. So, my thoughts still with her and that whole
yeah,
family, but also with you. Get over this real fast.
I'm gonna try. I'm probably gonna stay home again tomorrow and just do everything via Zoom, just to
Yeah.
make sure I am negative and I rest a little bit more, and then see how
Yes.
I do for Wednesday.
Yeah,
Maybe by Thursday I'll
absolutely.
be back. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Mike, I mean, like your Humpets and Jerry, just make sure I don't keep testing positive.
Right. Exactly. So,
Get out of my system.
okay.
Okay.
Well, take care. And if you need anything, to let us know.
Well, I'll just make sure Jeff talks about everything. He is in the biggest mess, I swear. I mean, this poor man.
I know. I know.
And his buyers, I haven't met them, so I can't say what kind of people they are, but they're just kind of all over the place.
And I thought, that's what I thought too. And then I kind of thought, well, Jeff's kind of all over the place. But so how much is Jeff and how much is it at the buyers?
Well, and he's got this sales background where he's negotiated pharmaceutical deals all the time. And I'm
Right,
quite sure the rules and regulations are different. And
right.
like when he presented this, well, they might want to do this rent to own thing. I'm like, okay, that's a new concept. Have you talked to their lender? Are they even
Yeah,
qualified for
right,
that?
right.
Oh, I need to talk to him. I'm like, yeah, he runs the
Oh my
finances.
gosh. Yeah,
He
yeah.
can't make your buyers can't do anything without financing. This poor lender has been fabulous. I don't know who this man is, but he has changed things 6 times.
Oh, wow.
We need to send him a bottle of wine at the end of this thing. He's been so nice to work with.
Well, yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll have to look it up and see who it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it is a bad situation. I kind of went through I pulled up Jeff's listing because we were right in the middle. That was the morning in my
Right.
pre-license class. It was the morning that he had gotten the resolution
Inspection,
back.
yeah.
So I pulled that house up and we were looking, and that was the first I'd looked at it before when he listed it, but this is the first time I'd really looked at it. And I don't know. I mean, I think he's pretty lucky that he's had 2 offers on it.
I think he's very lucky he has that 2 offers on it. I was very surprised.
So, yeah, I mean, that they
And we
might
got
have,
an issue when we get another VA or FHA buyer because it needs a new roof and it needs new siding.
right,
So
right.
that's a 30 grand.
I'm not so sure the buyer shouldn't have really considered this last one, reducing the price.
I know. I
But
know.
that's not our decision to make, but I don't know. And I didn't counsel Jeff on that either, but yeah, because I think he seems to think the property is worth that.
Back and
And
forth and ask
and
him
I
to
just don't see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway,
Yeah, it's out in the middle of eastern Jackson County, and there's not a whole lot to compare it to
right,
is the other problem.
right.
It sits on
And
3 acres, which has that.
right,
But
right. It's got the setting and yeah, I get that, but it doesn't have a basement. It's not
mm-mm,
in good condition,
mm-mm.
So yeah. Anyway, so I know, poor Jeff, and because I really do like Jeff, but
Well, I told him, I said, you just, you've got a complicated, set of buyers and sellers your first time out. So you'll be very experienced after this.
that's
But
exactly right.
he gets very not that we all don't, but I think he gets too wrapped up in it too quick. It's like you got to stay outside the perspective.
Right,
You're
right.
outside the box looking in. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, after Thursday, when we all found out that he had had the exact same conversation with all 3 of us, it's like, okay, any one of us had the right answer for you. Bless his heart. So,
Yes.
okay.
just looking for reassurance because he's like, well, can't I just do this? I'm like, no,
No.
it really doesn't work that way.
No, no.
So,
And I had
I
had
don't
that
know.
exact same conversation with him. He kept saying the VA inspection. And I said, now hold on, Jeff. There is no such thing as a VA inspection. So, right, it had to, so I knew I had talked with him and I knew that you had and that Kristen had
Yeah.
too, but bless his heart.
Well, I want to run something by you, clarification,
Okay.
because I've had agents ask me and I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
We're promoting a lot more of these private office exclusives, which I think is great.
Uh-huh.
Remind me just how that works. If that goes, if one of our agents, me, anybody takes a listing as private office exclusive, we can, and it goes on the MLS just to our brokerage, right? Don't you have to
Right.
list it, but just our 330 agents.
Right.
Do people just go into Broker Bay and sign up to go see it? Do they contact you as a listing agent first? How do you handle the showings?
Oh, I would say that it's probably on the listing. That's a good question, and that's probably different for each one, I would guess.
Okay, I'm going to go
Yeah.
back and read that contract because Serenity was specifically asking me, she has a possible listing that might want to go POE and she has all these questions. I'm like, I've never had a POE. I really don't know.
You can certainly set it up where in a situation like that, if that's what the seller wants to, that no, all scheduling has to go through Serenity. We can certainly do that. But
Okay.
I would say that that's an individual case by case decision and it's probably on MLS how they want it
Right.
done. But
Okay.
I think in any time we're going to be doing that, I think you have to have a conversation with the listing agent before you do it. I mean, to me, that just makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Was the listing agent always present? Is it?
No,
No,
not
not necessarily. Okay.
necessarily, not necessarily. And then the other thing about that is we have to have a buyer agency agreement. We cannot have just the buyer agreement that they're going to pay us. We have to be representing the buyer. If we're going to go show a POE, we have to have a buyer agency. Because if it's just someone that we don't have an agency agreement with, that means that we have, that the terms of the POE have been violated, that it was given to a general public person, the information.
That's what I thought. Yeah, we as the buying agent representing a potential buyer certainly would have to have agency still.
The agency agreement, right? Not
That
just a
makes
payment
sense.
agreement. Yeah,
And then you write the offer the exact
right,
same way
right.
as
But
you would for a regular MLS listing. Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to run that all by you.
yeah,
I get these
yeah.
questions. So I'm like, I don't. And I
But
didn't know
I'm
if the
sure.
rules had changed.
Oh, no, they haven't. It's just so weird. But yeah, for some reason they are becoming a little more popular and I don't know really, I don't know why. There may be a really good explanation for it, but they are, I saw our list keeps growing. And that could just be just because the spring market now. But yeah, I don't know. Again,
Okay.
I think that's one of those things
And
that
then
I
one
think
other
could
quick
be a little
question.
overused. Sure. Oh, you kind of froze.
To
I'm not, you're
Sunny was
freezing.
going to go. They have a buyer agent. I don't remember this. My back.
Yes, now you are. Okay.
Can you hear me now? I
Yep.
see you now. Okay.
Okay.
Somebody had us, they were asking questions about pre-MLS and they said, can you show the house when it's in pre-MLS status? I'm like, no, pretty sure you have to wait till you go live. She said, well, I see other agents doing it. I'm like, well, so isn't the rule still if you have a pre-MLS, you as the listing agent aren't supposed to let anybody in there?
Absolutely. No, if you let one person in, you have to let everybody in. You can't even take your own client through. You can't hold it open. No, you can't do anything. If you let one person through, then it has to go active on MLS.
What if your seller does it without you knowing?
We are always responsible for what our seller does.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like even if they on a POE, going back to POE, but even if they advertise a POE, we get in trouble for that. So same thing. Well, why would your seller be showing anybody a property? But yeah, same thing. If you as the listing agent find out that your seller did it, it's like, well, sorry, you blew it. Now we have to let everybody see it.
Well, that's what I wonder because I had that happen a couple weeks ago. My friend Tom was selling his house with Thrive and they went pre-MLS and I called him to say, oh, I see you guys went pre-MLS with Thrive. I'm so excited. He goes, yeah, do you still want to come by and see it? I can show it to you today. Like, well, that's not really how it works, Tom. You're supposed to wait till it goes live now. Why don't you go talk to your listing agent, make sure he's okay with that? I'm like, so I was just wondering, people don't seem to
They
understand,
don't. Oh my gosh, they don't. So,
especially when it's a friend.
right,
He's
right.
like, well, just come by. You're my friend. I'd love to show you the house. It's like, well,
Uh,
now you have an agent. It doesn't work that way.
I would love to see it too, but I can't. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. But we're still responsible for their actions. So yeah. I mean, we'd get in trouble for that too.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I guess, yeah, I guess in that situation, if the listing agent finds out that the seller has shown it to someone, the listing agent is under obligation to now talk to the seller, that now we have to go active.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that helps me when people come up with these questions. I can clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
Some things
Yep.
come up. I don't know how you remember all this, Linda.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like everything else. If I've had a bad experience, it's seared in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's true. You remember it forever.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good point.
yeah.
All right. Well,
But
thank you for everything.
I'm still not even close to Lynn's level though, so.
Yeah, I'm just grateful for all of you. Takes a
Well,
team to get everything accomplished.
it sure does, absolutely, yeah. Well,
All right.
take care of yourself.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go
Hope
take a
you feel
nap.
better. Okay, yeah, good
All
nap.
right.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.